Hello and welcome everyone to the Polity Primer series of Drishti IAS. My name is Pragya and today in this episode of Polity Primer, we will be concluding our Constitution series. The title of our today's discussion is the Salient Features of our Indian Constitution. In this discussion, we are going to study about firstly the background of our topic. Then we are also going to analyze some of the most important salient features of our Indian Constitution. And in the end, we are going to see a practice question for your prelims examination and a practice question for your mains examination. So if I talk about the background of our today's topic, you might have heard in the news that it is often argued that Indian Constitution is a borrowed constitution. Indian Constitution has taken important provisions from all of the constitutions all over the world and brought into force the Indian Constitution. But this is not the case. This is a very wrong statement to make that Indian Constitution is a borrowed constitution. And why am I saying so? Because it is unique in its content and spirit. Our founding fathers were aware of the fact that we need an Indian form of constitution that is suitable to Indian society. So even though we have borrowed important provisions from various constitutions of the around the world, but we have made our Indian constitution suitable to the needs of the Indian society. And though borrowed from almost every constitution of the world, the Constitution of India has several salient features that distinguish it from the constitutions of the other countries, and that is why it is completely wrong to say that it is a borrowed constitution and it has been just borrowed from other constitutions and not tweaked as per the needs of the Indian society. Our Indian constitution is completely Indian in nature, having various salient features. So let us study the salient features of our Indian constitution one by one. So the first feature of our own Indian constitution is that it is the lengthiest written constitution in the world. So see, the constitutions are of two types. First is the written constitution, and second is the unwritten constitution. Unwritten constitution. Okay. So the example of written constitution is the Constitution of USA. And the example of unwritten constitution is the Constitution of UK, that is largely dependent on judicial decisions and conventions. So our own Indian constitution is the lengthiest written constitution in the world. Okay, it is a very comprehensive, elaborate and a detailed document. So what are the reasons behind it? Why it is known as the lengthiest constitution in the world? So there are various factors involved. So the first factor is the geographical factors. Geographical factors. For example, the vastness of the country and the uniqueness of the country. So not only our country is very vast in nature, it is also very unique in nature. You will see various diversity across all over India, and that is why due to geographical features, many of the provisions had to be written down specifically. Then comes the historical factors. In historical factors, we are largely inspired by the Government of India Act of 1935. Government of India Act of 1935, and we have borrowed most of the provisions, or we are inspired from most of the provisions of the Government of India Act of 1935. Then comes the third feature, that is the third factor that is responsible for being the lengthiest constitution in the world, is the single nature of our Indian constitution. We do not have a separate constitution for states as well as the country. No, we have one single document that is governing the states as well as the whole country. Okay. Then comes the dominance of lawyers. Dominance of lawyers in the Constituent Assembly. You might have heard that Indian Constitution is also known as the lawyer's paradise. Why? Because the Constituent Assembly had the dominance of lawyers, and whenever there will be lawyers involved, definitely they will try to write down the provisions specifically. So that is why the founding fathers have written down our Indian constitution and have made it a very bulky document, and this is a salient feature of our Indian constitution, that it is the lengthiest constitution in the world. Moving forward, another salient feature of our Indian constitution is the bag of borrowing, or it is drawn from various sources. No doubt we have a bag of borrowing. We are inspired from various other constitutions in the world. So, although it has borrowed most of the provisions from the constitution of various other countries as well as from the Government of India Act, we have not adopted them as it is. We have tweaked it to the needs of the Indian society. Okay. So, this is what the statement is saying, that though it is borrowed, the Indian constitution makers made sure that the borrowed features were made suitable to the Indian conditions. And for example, if you talk about the cabinet form of governance. Okay, so we have taken it from the UK. The cabinet form of governance has been taken from the UK, or it is inspired from the UK model. But if you talk about the Indian cabinet, it is not supreme. It is not the sole authority as the UK parliament is. It is inferior to the constitution. So, in India, we have the constitutional supremacy rather than the parliamentary supremacy. So, though we have borrowed or we have inspired from various constitutions around the world, we have made it as per the needs of the Indian society. Okay, so you cannot just say that our constitution is a borrowed document. That will be very wrong to say. Moving forward, this is the bag of borrowing that I was talking about. Okay, so from the British constitution, we have borrowed the parliamentary form of government, rule of law, lawmaking procedure, single citizenship, institution of speaker, doctrine of pleasure, tenure of civil servants, etc. Then from the American constitution, we have borrowed the judicial system and the fundamental rights. We will be discussing how our Indian judicial system is different from the American judicial system. And if I talk about the fundamental rights, though they cover the Bill of Rights. In US, the fundamental rights or the human rights are known as the Bill of Rights. We also have our own fundamental rights, but we have divided it into a specific list of 6 broad categories. For example, right to freedom, right to constitutional remedies, etc. So, we have specifically categorized it under 6 heads, and this is a unique provision of our Indian constitution. Okay. So, from the Canadian constitution, we have borrowed the federal system with a strong central authority, residual powers and the center-state relationship. In fact, our center-state relationship is also very unique because we believe in cooperative federalism. Okay. From the Irish constitution, we have borrowed the directive principles of state policy, the election of the President of India, etc. Okay. From the Australian constitution, we have borrowed the concurrent list, freedom of trade and service within country. From the Weimar constitution, we have borrowed the emergency provisions of our country. From the constitution of the Soviet Union, we have borrowed the 5-year plans, fundamental duties. In fact, our Indian constitution did not originally have the fundamental duties. They were inserted by the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act, and right now we have 11 fundamental duties which form the foundational stones of our Indian constitution. Then, Government of India Act, one of the most inspiring documents of our Indian constitution, we have borrowed the office of the governor, powers of the federal jury. Okay. Then the South African constitution, we have borrowed the amendment of our Indian constitution. So, this is in broad the bag of borrowing that I am talking about. So, though we have borrowed various provisions, though we have we are inspired by various provisions of our Indian constitution, but when you will study the Indian constitution, you will also feel that no, it is more suitable to our Indian need. It is, catering to the Indian needs. It is our own constitution, not just copy paste of some other constitution. Okay, and the judiciary also has helped in the evolving interpretation of the Indian constitution. So, yes, definitely the judiciary has played a proactive role in interpreting the constitution of the India and making it more dynamic, and it can adapt itself to the changing needs of the society. That is why we studied in our previous episode that Indian constitution is not a static document, it is a living document. Moving forward, let us discuss some other salient features of our Indian constitution. So our Indian constitution is a blend of rigidity and flexibility. So constitutions around the world are divided as rigid constitutions and flexible constitution. Rigid constitution and flexible constitutions. Okay. For example, US constitution is very rigid. It is almost impossible to amend or bring changes in the US constitution. On the other hand, if I talk about the UK constitution, okay, so the UK constitution is very flexible in nature. So firstly, due to its unwritten nature. Secondly, it is largely dependent on conventions, on judicial precedents, on judicial decisions. And that is why the provisions of UK constitution can be amended as ordinary laws. But if I talk about the constitution of India, it is neither too rigid nor too flexible, but a synthesis of both. So some of the provisions of our Indian constitution can be amended by a special majority. And some of the provisions of our Indian constitution require the special majority of the parliament and with the ratification by half of the total states. Okay, so amendment procedure we have discussed in detail in our Polity Primer series only. And we have seen that amendments are of three types. Firstly, simple majority amendments. They are not particularly considered to be a constitutional amendment. And secondly, the amendments which require special majority. And thirdly, the amendments which require not only the special majority, but the ratification of the states as well. And that is why I am saying that it is neither too rigid nor too flexible, but it is an amalgamation of both. Okay, moving forward, there is this federal system of our Indian constitution, but tilt is towards a central unit. And why I am saying so? Because the constitution establishes a federal system of government along with a number of unitary features such as the single citizenship, such as the all India services, etc., such as the residuary of power of the parliament, legislative power of the parliament on making laws or in the three lists of our Indian constitution that are provided in the 7th schedule. So the residuary power lies in the parliament. Then we have the emergency provisions in which it is like a unitary form of government. So that is why our constitution is federal in some aspect, but it has a unitary bias, and that is why our Indian constitution is also known as quasi-federal in nature. Quasi-federal in nature. Okay. So it is a blend of federal features with a unitary bias in it. Okay, Indian model is based on cooperative federalism. So as I was explaining to you before also, we follow a model of cooperative federalism. We don't state that central government is more powerful and state governments are not powerful at all. No, we follow a cooperative model of federalism between the central government and the state governments. They cooperate with each other to exist in our Indian constitution as well as in the power. Okay. Then comes the most important features, that is integrated and independent judiciary. So what exactly is the difference between Indian constitution and US constitution? So thus in India we follow single hierarchy of judiciary. For example, at the top of the hierarchy you have the Supreme Court, then comes the High Courts, and then comes various district courts under the High Courts. District courts under the High Courts. So this is a single form of judiciary that is very independent in nature. That means that the Supreme Court is the topmost court in our country, the apex court in our country, the highest court of appeal. The High Court are under the Supreme Court, and under the High Court there are various other district courts. But what happens in the US? They have two different courts. First, it is known as the Federal Law Court, which enforces the federal laws, and then there are state courts that enforces the state laws. So this is a difference between Indian constitution and US constitution. In India, we follow a single hierarchy of judiciary, integrated judiciary with Supreme Court at top. We do not have other such judiciaries. High Court comes under the Supreme Courts. Okay, so this is the difference between Indian constitution and US constitution. We do not follow judiciary at the central level separately and state level separately. Moving forward, let us discuss the secularism of our Indian constitution, India as a secular country. So, Indian constitution embodies a positive concept of secularism rather than a negative concept of secularism, that is giving equal respect to all religions or protecting all religions equally. So, our Indian constitution talks about freedom of religion. In India, religion is a private affair of individuals. The state has no part in having any role towards religion. State has no religion, and this is the distinctive feature of our Indian constitution, that we follow a Indian version of secularism and not the Western model of secularism. So this is in contrast with the Western model of secularism, which connotes a complete separation between religion and state. In India, state can regulate the religion, but we have freedom of religion, and we consider religion to be a private affair, not of the affair of the state. So we follow an Indian version of our secularism. Okay. Then there are emergency provisions. When I was discussing that our Indian constitution is a federal constitution with unitary bias, I just said that emergency provisions are an example of this. So Indian constitution contains detailed provisions for three types of emergency: national emergency, state emergency, and the financial emergency. National emergency is Article 352, state emergency is Article 356, also known as the President's rule in the state. Okay, and 365, Article 365, and financial emergency is Article 360. Let me know in the comment box whether we have experienced or whether a financial emergency has ever been imposed in India or not. And it converts federal structure into a unitary one without any formal amendment to the constitution. Whenever there is an imposition of emergency, the complete control of India will fall into the union government, and states will have to act as per the directions of the union government. And this is also a special feature of our Indian constitution. Moving forward, let us discuss the provision of single citizenship. In India, again, citizenship, and there is a difference between, so as per the Indian constitution, there is a difference between citizenship also from the US. In US, you follow dual citizenship. Dual citizenship. And what do we understand by dual citizenship? You are a citizen of US as well as the state in which you are living, because US federal structure is different from our federal structure. India is a union of state, not a federation of state. On the other hand, US is a federation of state. What do I mean by this? That states have right to secede from the federation, but this is not the case in India. India, the states do not have the right to secede from the union. They are coming together to form one union, and same is the case with US. So that is why we have different citizenship and a single universal Indian citizenship, rather than having citizenship at two levels, having a US citizenship also and a state citizenship also, because Indian federal structure is different from US federal structure. So though the Indian constitution is federal and envisages a dual polity, what do we understand by a dual polity? Government at central and state level. Not only this, we have included government, three-tier government. Three-tier government by the 73rd and 74th Amendments Act. 74th Constitutional Amendment Act. Okay. Now we have governments at villages, known as the village governments, and municipal governments as well. So the dual polity concept has been replaced by having three-tier government by the 73rd and the 74th Constitutional Amendment Act. It provides for only a single citizenship, that is the Indian citizenship. You are Indian. You do not belong to some other state. Like, you cannot say that, okay, for identification, you can say that I belong to Delhi, I belong to Gujarat, but you are a Indian citizen. And that is the difference between Indian citizenship and US citizenship. In US, you can say that, okay, I stay in California, I am a Californian citizen also. I stay in Texas, so I am a Texas citizen also. But this is not the case in India. We follow a single citizenship, and you are a Indian citizen. Okay. So in India, all citizens, irrespective of the state in which they are born, or reside enjoy the same political and civil rights of citizenship all over the country, and no discrimination is made between any Indian citizen. Whatever civil and political rights I am getting being a citizen, being a resident of Bihar, you are also getting being a resident of Gujarat. So no discrimination is made between any citizen in India. Okay. Then independent bodies. Independent bodies is another salient feature of our Indian Constitution. So the Indian Constitution not only provides for the legislative, executive and judicial organs of the government, central and state, but also establishes certain independent bodies. For example, the CAG, Comptroller and Auditor General of India, Election Commission, UPSC, state PSCs, state. All of these are constitutional bodies that are established by our Indian Constitution, and they are very independent in nature. Okay, so they are envisaged by the Constitution as the bulwarks of the democratic system of the governance in India. So all these constitutional bodies that are established by our Indian Constitution is a salient feature of our Indian Constitution. Then comes lastly the preamble. Why I am discussing preamble in last? Because preamble was never a part of original Indian Constitution. Yes, you will be shocked to know the trivia about the Indian preamble, that it was added in the last to our Indian Constitution. It was never a part of the original Indian Constitution. So the preamble was placed in the Constitution during the last days of the constitutional conventions by the Committee on Style, which wrote its final draft with Governor Morris leading to the effort. It was not proposed or discussed on the floor of the convention beforehand. We never had any discussion on having a preamble in the Constituent Assembly. Preamble was added as a part of the Constitution by having a last moment discussion, and it is based on the objective resolution that was provided by our first Prime Minister of India, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. So preamble, though being an important part of our Indian Constitution, it was never the part of the original Constitution. But this is also a salient feature of our Indian Constitution, that is we are having a unique preamble for ourselves. Okay. So this is what distinguishes our Indian Constitution from various other constitutions around the world. With this, we come to a conclusion of our today's discussion. We have seen what are the salient features of our Indian Constitution. We have also argued that it is not correct to say that our Indian Constitution is borrowed. We have discussed that various salient features are there which make it very unique, and the makers of the Indian Constitutions were cognizant of the fact that Indian Constitution should be suitable to the Indian needs. So whenever you will hear that it is a borrowed constitution, kindly counter that. No, our Indian Constitution is not borrowed. It is very unique and very our own, like it is suitable to our Indian needs, and it is a dynamic document. It is not a static document. Okay. Now let us discuss a practice question for your prelims examination. So the question is, which of the following are the features of the Indian Constitution? Number 1, integrated judiciary. Number 2, universal adult franchise. Number 3, three-tier government. And number 4, rigid and flexible constitution. Your codes are: option A is 1 and 3 1, 2 and 3 only. Option B is 1, 2 and 4 only. Option C is 2, 3 and 4 only. And option D, all of the above. So you have to state that which of these features are the salient features of our Indian Constitution, and kindly drop your answers in the comment box below. Now let us discuss a practice question for your mains examination. So the question is, examine how the Indian Constitution is unique in its own way, despite being an amalgamation of constitutions around the world. So you will start, as I have started my discussion today, that yes, it is often argued that the Constitution is a borrowed constitution. It is having a bag of borrowing, but it is not the case. Our Indian Constitution has various salient features which make it our own constitution. okay, which is suitable to the needs of the Indian society, and then you can mention various salient features of our Indian constitution, and you can conclude that our constitution is not a static document, it is a very dynamic document, and the amendment of our Indian constitution, the purposive interpretation of our Indian constitution by the judiciary makes it as a living document. It can change as per the changing society. So you can conclude very holistically. I hope this session was insightful for you. If you have any feedback regarding this session, kindly drop it in the comment box below. If you found the today's discussion to be helpful, kindly like the video and subscribe to our channel for more such updates. Thank you.